Yes. Okay.
Yeah.
It's recording, right?
Yeah.
Good. Okay, good. Okay, letting people in. 3, 2, 1, go. Hi there, welcome everybody.
Welcome to the session. Hello. We're just letting people in. Welcome everyone.
Yeah. Hey everybody, hope you know hangovers today from all the WOMEX parties last night.
Exactly. Hope you had a great time as well.
In your home parties, pajama parties, maybe.
Having been to many, many WOMEXs, I know what those WOMEX parties are like.
Okay. So, hi everyone. We are going to wait 1 more minute so we make sure we let all people in. While waiting, please, you can use the chat and share with us who are you, where in the world you are joining from, and any thoughts that come to your mind. Just please feel free to share it with us within the chat. We will be happy to hear from you. Okay, so we have one more. All right. Hi, everyone. We're going to wait just a couple of seconds more. And then here we go. Hi, everyone. Who are you? Where are you in the world? Please feel free to put it in the chat. Let us know. How do you feel today?
Okay, Camila, how do you feel? More coming?
I think we can start for now, and then if there is more people coming, we just let them in.
Oh, there they are.
Ready and waiting.
That is one. Hi. Perfect. Okay. So, hi everyone. Good morning, good evening, depending on where in the world are you. Welcome to this session. My name is Camila Dichi from the WOMEX team, and here I am today with my dear colleague Jasmine Cope, who will be helping you and assisting you if you have some questions in regards to the Zoom tools. Yes, I would like to, well, first, thank you so much to our wonderful speakers of today, Ian Smith, Tatiana Domani, Roche Patterson, and Mark Ringwood for making this post-Brexit conversation possible. And I'm sure they will have many interesting insights to share with us. But before handing over to them, I would like to also make sure that you all know this session, it's going to be recorded. And if you have some problems with that or you feel uncomfortable, please let us know before we dive in. Yeah, without further ado, I welcome to stage to Ian. Please take it over.
Thanks a lot. Hi, everybody. Hope you're all well, happy. And as I said earlier, that there's not too many WOMEX hangovers this morning or this evening or wherever you happen to be in the timeline. I'm just going to change my view so I can see more of you. There you go. So before we start this, many of you will know me anyway from well, not too many WOMEXs, but a lot of them. I'll introduce each of my colleagues today that are going to do this panel. And it stemmed out of a desire to create a non-political or an apolitical platform, as far as that is even possible, relating to pre- and post-Brexit. We're in Brexit land now, but we're in the transition period, of course. So until January the 1st, we don't know what the hell is happening. But anyway, without any more ado, I'm going to introduce each one of my colleagues, and they're going to say who they are, what they do, and what experience they've got. And I'll start with Mr. Mark Ringwood. You have to unmute your mic, Mark. There you go. That's it.
I'm in live. Hello, everybody. welcome. I hope it's going to be an interesting panel. Just to give you a bit of background to me, I've been an agent for over 40 years and recently turned promoter for about the last 15. I've got a barking dog in the background, so if you hear that, that's her.
The joys of
Interestingly, last night, the government dropped a 514-page document about what's going to happen, supposedly after the 31st of December, which kept quite a few of us up until well past midnight reading and trying to digest. It wasn't the easiest tome to manage, but I think we got most of the salient points out of it. So I should do my best to answer any queries. I tend to issue up to 200 certificates of sponsorship, which are basically the same as a work permit in other parts of the world. And they tend to be for musicians who've come in from as far afield as the USA, Mali, Australia, India, and Senegal. Also, there's quite a few for yoga practitioners as well. Obviously, that will all change a little bit because people from the EU will be required to have a certificate of sponsorship as of the 1st of January.
Thanks, Mark. Just before I say anything, introduce the other speakers, the whole idea of this is for people working in both directions, of course. So this is going into the UK for creatives and support staff, technicians, managers, etc. And also, of course, UK musicians, artist managers, dancers, film crews coming into the EU. So the way this will split as we go further is that I'll deal mainly with the UK into EU, and Mark will do the other direction. And now I'm going to introduce Tatiana Nomani from Music Export Austria. Tatiana.
Hey guys, happy to be here today. As Ian said, we are an export office. We are a funding organization working with artists. We try to help musicians produce albums, but also go on tour in Austria and abroad. We are also part of EMI, which is the umbrella organization for European music export offices. And we are quite confused and concerned about the implications Brexit might have on joint programs that we, as a European country, are doing with the UK. And we are obviously also quite a little bit worried about the status of Austrian artists that are currently living and working in the UK. Stuff like festival cooperations, will they go on? Will there be joint financing possibilities? Yeah, there's a lot of open questions for us at the moment.
Thanks, Tatiana. We'll do our best to try and answer many of them today, but some of them will be a little open-ended. Now, I'd like to introduce you to, in his own words, he's not going to say very much unless he absolutely needs to, because it's very straightforward, but very clear in real terms. And that's Mr. Roger Patterson, the Carnet guy, otherwise known as Rog. Here's Rog.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for being here. My background is in tour management since the 1980s. For the past 30 years or so, I've been concentrating on issuing and consulting on ATA carnets. Not a particularly exciting subject, but it helps people get equipment across borders. So that's what I do.
Thanks a lot, Rog. Much appreciated. Okay, a couple of little bits of housekeeping just before we continue, or before I give an introduction to this. WOMEX have very kindly agreed to leave this video recording up for some time afterwards, so you can always refer back to it for any points that may come up during the conversations. Also, there will be some downloads that we provided, including a link to our website. That's UK Europe Arts Work Info. It's a completely free site to use. It's also completely self-funded, and it's also totally apolitical. It's fact-checked information for you guys with the information you need. Part of the reason we're doing this is because there's a lot of misinformation and disinformation out there. Some of it politically motivated, and some of it simply people don't know what the hell is happening and so are guessing. So everything that we've done on the website is, as far as possible, fact-checked. And also there's a video playlist of specific items that we're going to talk about throughout the session. Okay, so Camilla at WOMEX, if you can put up slide 2 on the main PowerPoint, please.
Yes.
Right. Do you want to do the poll? Just quickly checking the little poll first, or are we going to do that?
Oh, sorry. Yeah, absolutely. I totally forgot about that. We're also going to have some polling through a couple of simple questions, which we'd really appreciate you answering. So the first one, of course, which sector best represents your work? The reason we need this, obviously, is to know that we're targeting the people that really need to know and where we're going, where we haven't reached certain parts of the sectors. And please do pass the word on about this, it's really important. So there's a little poll there, if you wouldn't mind ticking a box or not, either way, it's fine by me, but if you could, that would be much appreciated. And that will be repeated at the end, and also there'll be another small poll, excuse me, a little later on. Okay, here we go. Slide 2, please, on the PowerPoint presentation.
Coming along, 1 sec.
Thank you. Is it there? If not, wait a minute. Yeah, there we go. Okay. So as you can see, we've got 4 bullet points there. What is the problem? Well, part of it is the confidence on booking shows for artists and creators generally, whether they're musicians, which most people working with WOMEX are, or dancers or filmmakers. And the important thing in all of this is about decision making. So that because people don't necessarily know what's happening, and it's getting closer and closer, the 1st of January, of course, next year, then that is becoming ever more important. Now, we started all this before COVID. So, of course, we now have a double whammy of COVID and Brexit impacting the ability for people to be able to work and cross the borders. So, who does that affect? Yeah, agents, managers, artists' assumptions as well. And that is about how you approach other people when you're trying to book a show. And you're saying to them, yeah, everything's fine. And so they say, well, what's it going to cost us? How are you going to get here? I'm ignoring COVID for the time being throughout this conversation, because obviously that's a totally different situation. And then you have to answer certain questions. Well, how much is it going to cost? Well, we have work permits, we have visas, we have carnets. And there are some other aspects to that. So can I have slide 3, please? Okay, so these are the main points that we're going to discuss today. And we do have some fairly clear answers in some ways. In other ways, we don't really know what's happening until the 1st of January and probably a lot further forward. So visas, work permits, and what really happens at the border, both in the UK and the EU, is we all know, if we've worked in the creative arts industries, of people going to the border. Maybe they're a third country national, they don't have the right visa, or they have the right visa and right documents, and the border control staff don't necessarily know the regulations. And it's sometimes a little bit of a lottery, frankly. And I'm going to bring Roger in on that later on carnets and the reality of what happens at the border. And Roger, remember, this is being recorded. So we're going to be, shall we say, circumspect and diplomatic in the way in which we discuss that. So we got visas, work permits, carnets for equipment, and carnets are basically documents about the temporary import and export of equipment. So you're not going to sell it when you get over the border, and there's got to be some way of working that out. And that is totally different to merchandise, which you'll see is the next point. That is a totally different situation to carnets, but it requires documentation and some costs. You'll see I'm going to go through these last 3 bits quite quickly. Tax, no change between the two, because the double taxation arrangements were recently, in the last few months, re-ratified. And so there's no difference. That means that payments to artists and whoever else, the agents or whatever, will not be affected. The only problem is going to be is when you're coming into Europe, generally, the EU 27, each country, of course, will have its own way of policing that particular situation regarding whether or not you have an appropriate visa or work permit. And so who is going to check that once you're in the Schengen area? And finally, unintended consequences, before I'm going to open this up to other folks. The unintended consequences, of which there are several, I'll give you one example, and that is CITES, which you can see on the screen there. If you can take the PowerPoint off now, please, for a time being. CITES is the, for those of you that don't know, is the regulations concerning rare species and rare woods. And so before Brexit, no one thought about this generally because no one ever got checked at customs. But basically, if you have an instrument with a rare wood or a rare and endangered species like ivory, you could have your instrument upon inspection confiscated at the border, which is yes, it's a nightmare. You can certificate your instruments, etc., but no one mentioned this, of course. Well, there's a big surprise, not. So I've done a basic introduction, and now what I think I'm going to do is pass this to Mark about going into the UK from Europe in terms of what's required for work permits and visas. We think at the moment, although Mark's now just trolled through 500 pages of documentation last night, I think it's mostly going to be treated as though you will be treated as third country nationals coming from the EU, but it may be a higher or lower bar depending on where you're coming from, whether or not you just need a certificate of sponsorship, a COS, or whether you also need something called a permitted paid engagement visa, or something called a creative tier 5 and sporting, which I'll ask Mark to say something about in a moment. But please understand that there's a lot of people saying you've got to have a creative tier 5 and sporting, which is expensive and time consuming. We don't necessarily know at the moment. So now I'll hand over to Mark.
Thank you, Ian. I'll try and make it as simple as I possibly can. In order to work in the UK, you can come through 3 different routes. Ian's outlined them in some degree. There's the COS route, certificate of sponsorship, which is also aligned to a visa. And I'll deal with those 2 in a moment. There's the permitted paid engagements, and there's the permit-free festival route. Permit-free festivals run to about 20 to 30 and quite vague. And in order to arrange your certificate of sponsorship, which you need primarily, you have to have a sponsor, and the sponsor is normally your agent, but it could be a third party to arrange that. The sponsor is regulated by the Home Office at the end of the day, and pays a license fee. And from memory, because I paid mine about 3.5 years ago, I think it's 4 years it lasts for. And you're subject to very strict regulations in terms of who you work with, how you work with, how you tell them you're going to work, how they earn money, where the money goes, and various other things. But I won't get too bogged down into that. Certain countries require both a COS, which certificate of sponsorship is just a number, but they also require a visa. So the countries that you come from that require a visa, you're termed as being a visa national. If you don't require a visa, you are a non-visa national. Non-visa nationals are very simple to do and straightforward, but a visa national is a little bit more complicated and more costly, and it affects around about 50 or 60 countries throughout the world, and quite diverse countries as well. I printed off the list, and some of the usual suspects are on there, but you've got Zimbabwe, you've got North Korea, Kosovo's in there, Nepal, Niger, Nigeria, North Macedonia, some quite surprising additions to it. First of all, you're issued with a COS. With that COS, you can then make an appointment at the local visa office, which sometimes can be quite a way away, especially in West Africa. It may be a 2 or 3 day journey to the visa office. And the visa office, you can make an appointment with the visa office, you rock up there with your passport and your COS, and they process it, but it can take 2 to 3 working weeks to actually produce it. Then you go back and receive it, or you can pay for a premium service and have it delivered to you. And it's entirely as to how you want to work with that. So you've got your visa national, who has got a COS, and then you have your COS holders, who are generally, or tend to be, and for this purpose in time, tend to be, are going to be Western Europeans within the EU, who will now become required to have a COS in order to get into the UK. That wasn't the case before. Freedom of travel was permitted, but as of the 1st of January, you're going to require a COS. As a sponsor and a person who was on the Managed Migration Task Force when all this was being processed, and it took about 3 or 4 years to do, we generally tend to look at the 3 routes, which I said are the COS and visa, the permitted paid engagements, and the permit-free festivals. The one we try and avoid, if at all possible, is the permitted paid engagements, because it's down to interpretation. You don't really need anything to come to the UK, when it's at the behest of the border official who lets you in to say, well, actually, yeah, you've got a letter saying you're working for the BBC, we'll let you in. It doesn't always happen that way. As Ian alluded to right at the beginning, there are different interpretations placed on the way in which border officials manage migration into the UK. What is fundamentally important is that if you're coming into the UK and you either have a visa as a visa national or you're a non-visa national, you make sure that you approach the immigration officials and don't go through the fast channel. There's a fast channel at Heathrow, which we think will work for EU nationals. We don't know for definite in the future, but it's very, very important that your passport is stamped and your COS number is written into that, because that validates it. If you come in any other way and are not validated, you're working illegally, and you can be literally deported on the spot. It's as serious as that. I think in a nutshell, that's it for the time being, Ian.
Okay, thanks, Mark. That's cool. A couple of things that Mark said, just to clarify, and I've noticed a few things on the chat as well as we've been talking. When Mark says you need somebody to issue a COS, or it's called a certificate of sponsorship, like a work permit, and it could be your agent or whoever, those people have to be registered with UK borders. It's not somebody who's just, oh, it's your agent, they can issue. The other question was on cost, sorry, not COS, that my old friend Ken mentioned in the chat. The cost at the moment for visas are all varied slightly. A COS can cost very little, depending on who you're talking to. Or a commercial agent sometimes, I don't mean commercial music agents, I mean commercial agents supplying these can sometimes ask stupid amounts of money, but shouldn't be too expensive, maybe 20, 30, 40, 50, it depends who you're talking to. But the permitted paid engagement visa, I think at the moment is £94 or £95. And that allows you entry for up to 1 month of working in the UK. As Mark said, it's often recommended that you have a certificate of sponsorship and a permitted paid, even if you don't really need it, because it gives you extra clout as you're coming through the border, and have as much documentation as possible. Coming into the EU, that depends very much on each of the EU states, if you're a UK-based musician or artist. And on the UK Europarts Work info site, I did a lot of research on this. There's a whole page with specific countries and their requirements. And it ranges from no entry or at all without a visa, all the way up to 1 month without a visa, depending on which country within the EU. There's been a lot of talk about Schengen work visas, etc., which in reality don't really exist for the UK coming into the EU, because each of the EU 27 maintains its sovereign right to work with third country nationals as it sees fit. Bit complicated, I'm not going to go too deeply into that. So I'll just see if there's anything else that came up on the chat. Yeah, so there are various routes into the UK. It is possible, I'll go back to Mark for just a moment. Mark, there's been some chat about whether or not it will be possible just to come into the UK with just a certificate of sponsorship and nothing else. What's your impression of that?
It all depends on the country you're coming in from. There is a quite a distinct list of countries where you require a visa as well.
Yeah, I'm thinking about EU right now that things are changing.
There's nobody from the EU who's going to require a visa as well, as at the moment.
At the moment, so it's just a cause.
Yeah, the one thing I should have said is that a cause is valid for 2 weeks prior to your first work date and for 2 weeks after the last work date.
That's good information. Now that's important because obviously people are worried about cost and ease of access into the UK. So in real terms, if it just is the certificate of sponsorship, it is going to be relatively straightforward and not very expensive to do that still. But now I'm going to bring Rog in on this, a little later Tatiana. Thanks for being patient, Tatiana, because this affects, this is the main problem, in my opinion, moving forward after exit on the 1st of January. And that is that we're all going to need carnets. And I'm not going to say any more about this for a moment. I'm going to pass you on to Rog, who'll do a very small intro, and then WOMEX dudes, could you put up slide 1 of the PowerPoint presentation for carnets? Here you go, Rog, over to you. You're muted, Rog.
Let's try that without being muted.
There you go.
Basically, the problem is there's a barrier going up where there shouldn't be a barrier. Until the 1st of January, there's been free movement of goods between the UK and every other country in the EU. As of the 1st of January, that ends. And in order to take professional equipment between the UK and the rest of the EU, you're going to need an ATA carnet. It's possible there might be exemptions to this. Currently, if you take goods into Switzerland, personal musical instruments, you don't have to use a carnet. That rule was established to enable orchestras to enter Switzerland, and it applies also to guitarists, small bands, folk bands, and so forth, such that unless you're taking a drum kit and lots of keyboards, you can generally get into Switzerland without a carnet. It would be sensible for that to also apply to the UK, but that would be sensible, and therefore it probably won't happen, but we just don't know. We're going to have to wait and see what's agreed or not agreed by the 1st of January. For the time being, we're assuming that what you're going to have to do is obtain an ATA carnet from the country that you're starting off from, the country of domicile of the equipment, and declare the goods at the border, Dover, Calais, the international airport of departure and arrival. It's going to cost money, it's going to take time, it's going to be an administrative headache. It means you'll need to either contact a carnet broker, such as myself in the UK, or direct contact with the Chamber of Commerce and allow time and money to get your equipment across the borders. The alternative, of course, is simply to hire equipment locally, but as we all know, it's not that straightforward. You need to take your own guitar, you need to take your own specific pieces of equipment. Even if you're taking a snare drum, it's still professional equipment. It's not just a matter of, oh, we'll hire it at the destination. That's it, that's the problem.
Rog, I'm going to ask you another question on behalf of the people watching and being involved at the moment, which I know the answer to because you told me after I got totally confused about this. In terms of the carnet, you have to pay for the actual carnet at your local Chamber of Commerce, wherever you might be, Chamber of Trade. So whichever country you do that locally, and there is a fee for that. But there's also an amount of money to be paid either for what is almost an insurance policy for security of the value of the goods. Could you explain a little bit about how that works between paying a deposit or paying for an indemnity?
Yeah, you have the choice of either paying a deposit, which is equivalent to a certain percentage of the value of the goods, depending on which country you're going into. If you're going into Switzerland, it's 25%. If you're going into Russia, it's 65%, for example. And when you get back to your country of origin, when you have the carnet discharged, assuming you've operated it correctly, you get that deposit back. In most cases, because of the high costs of equipment, high value equipment, it's simply not sensible to leave a deposit. You pay for an indemnity guarantee, which effectively says, right, the Chamber of Commerce is going to take responsibility for this money instead of you. You pay them for what amounts to an insurance policy against you messing up and then going out of business and leaving the Chamber of Commerce with a customs claim. So that's the common way of doing things.
That's cheaper, isn't it, Rog?
It usually works out cheaper, depending on the cost of finance, but it certainly lowers your risk. It means you're not having to tie up potentially millions of pounds in a deposit.
Yeah, slide 2, please, WOMEX.
I just saw something come up on the chat, by the way, a question regarding whether you'd need to operate a carnet into each individual EU country, and the answer is no. The remaining 27 countries in the EU can be regarded still as a single territory for carnet purposes. So if you're a band coming from the UK, you can operate your carnet out of the UK, operate it into France, for example, and then tour within the EU. And perhaps at the end of your tour, you'd fly back from Sweden to the UK. That's the next time you operate the carnet, you operate it out of Sweden. So from carnet perspectives, the EU is a single territory.
Brilliant. And I've just seen a chat from Seb in UK. Yes, the deposit you pay, if it's a deposit or cash guarantee, sorry, cash or bank guarantee, you get back in full. Yep. Once you discharge, means you go back to the Chamber of Commerce, it's all been stamped properly, everything's okay, customs have said it's okay, and they give you your money back. If you do it as an indemnity through a broker, then normally, or through a Chamber of Commerce, then that's like, no, you don't get your premium back.
That's correct, yeah. At a small scale, a small touring band from the UK, for example, if you're going to Switzerland with, let's say, £5,000 worth of equipment, you'll typically pay roughly £300 for the issue of the carnet and a further £75 to £100 as the security cost if you were not leaving a deposit. So you wouldn't get that £75 to £100 back. If you decide to leave a deposit, you still pay the £300 for the issue of the carnet or thereabouts, but you then perhaps put up that the percentage, which would be a little under £2,000 as your deposit. And eventually, when the carnet is discharged, you get that £2,000 back, assuming you've done it right.
Yeah, and I've just seen another question pop up. What about equipment instruments from outside the EU? It's exactly the same. The ATA carnet is worldwide. It depends on which country you're going into, and wherever you're coming from. If you're coming outside an area, not EU state to EU state, because there's this thing called the EU. So they've got an agreement for everybody, which the UK have decided to leave.
We've made ourselves into another Norway, effectively. So if an American band, for example, is coming to Europe to do a tour, and they would normally allow for touring within the EU, including the UK, and Switzerland and Norway, they would have an ATA carnet. They would operate that carnet into the EU, into Norway, into Switzerland. They now just need to have another pair of importation, re-exportation vouchers, because they're going to have to treat the UK as a completely separate territory.
Fine. I'm going to bring Tatiana in now. Thanks very much, Raj. Much appreciated. From her point of view, as for Music Export Office, I think this is quite interesting. Also, I just had another chat from Ken over in Sweden. There is no limit on how much the carnet can be. It just means that you're going to have to pay a lot more. And just to clarify one thing Roger said, when you're taking equipment in and out of a country, it depends what that equipment is. Each country, for example, if you sell clothes in a particular country, there's a particular rate of tax on those clothes being sold. If it's a musical instrument or computer equipment, etc., they're all different. So that's why you need to go to your chamber of, well, you have to go to your Chamber of Commerce, or better still, find a local agent who will do all this for you, like Roger does in the UK for carnets worldwide. And that's something you would do locally. There's no limit on the amount of equipment. I mean, obviously, if you're taking millions and millions of dollars, euros, pounds worth of gear, then you'll be well used to doing this anyway. So now I'm going to bring Tatiana on board. From your side, Tatiana, and from Music Exports Office perspective, what are your thoughts on the problems, difficulties going forward?
Well, it's, as I said in the beginning, it's rather confusing. Maybe to add to the carnet discussion, maybe you want to also talk about merchandise.
Yeah, sorry.
Do you want to edit now, or then I continue?
No, I'll do that now and then come back to you, Tatiana. That's really
Yes.
good. Thank you. Yeah, of course, with merchandise, and Roger may correct me. Keep listening to this, Roger, because I got this wrong. I tried to include it on a carnet. You cannot include your merchandise on the carnet. What you have to do if you're if you're exporting goods for sale, then you would normally pay the VAT and import duty at the point of import. Is that right, Rog?
Yes, certainly with Switzerland, this is how it currently works. We don't actually know yet how it's going to work with mainland EU or how it's going to work with the UK. But with Switzerland, in theory, you make a declaration of goods intended for sale. You pay the VAT and import duty on those goods at the border.
Yeah.
And you declare what you've sold and what you've got left, and you basically get the change. You get the VAT and the duty back on the goods that have been sold. That's wonderful in theory. If you're on a tight red line tour, it's not quite that straightforward.
Thank you, Roger. I mean, the other thing to say in all this, I'll go back to Tatiana in a moment, is that a lot of this is going to be about logistics as well. Because when you're going from gig to gig or going in and out of the EU or UK, nobody really knows what's going to happen with some of this stuff across the actual borders, and it could delay you. I mean, something that Tatiana sent me the other day, which you might all find quite amusing as well. There's a new rule coming in about paying VAT for the UK locally. So if you're in the EU or any other nation state, you're supposed to pay the VAT on any goods sold into the UK. And this came up on my Twitter feed a few days ago with Captain Kirk of the USS Enterprise. Seriously, I'm not joking. Check William Shatner's Twitter feed. And he's got a small shop that he sells to the UK. And he said, not selling any more to the UK because I have to make all these declarations and pay the VAT in America. So it's a bit of a nightmare, but if you want a little laugh, look at William Shatner, Captain Kirk's Twitter feed, and that's your other thing for the day. I'm going to pass you on to Tatiana.
Yes.
You, Tatiana.
Yeah, as you said, I mean, the discussion was pretty much focused on touring musicians up until now, but there is lots of other areas where we actually don't know what the implications of Brexit will be with regards to the import and export of goods, which could be music, physical albums, for example, or what's going on with tariffs, VAT, licensing, intellectual property. There is some information, and I would advise everyone to check with your local Chamber of Commerce and or the local embassy to get the current information on that one. But it makes for a mixture of a lot of different factors that implicate joint projects in the future. And as you might know, the UK decided not to go on with the next phase of the Creative Europe funding project, which will also mean there might be less joint cultural exchange project. Maybe festivals will lose the financing, stuff like this. So apart from the impact on a single artist, this has much wider cultural and political implications, of course. And lots is up to discussion. And Ian, I know in the beginning you said you prefer not to mix the discussion up with Corona as well. But of course, it's happening at the same time, which will only make things even more confusing.
No, please do.
I wish I wouldn't have to. In talking with artists, from my perspective, a lot of them just miss very clear, actionable information. They don't know who to turn to. There is no joint European effort up until now to provide this kind of information. And there is still not a lot of funding initiatives in place to maybe cover the costs that will pile on the artist side, and to take the risk out of touring on playing festivals especially for newcomer artists, up and coming, or niche artists who typically don't make huge amounts of money when they're touring the UK, maybe for the first or second time. What I find very interesting is that at the same time, the UK is not losing its magnetism on the pop cultural side of things. And especially young artists still want to go to the UK as much as they probably want to go to the US as well. And I think we will see a lot of economic and political change, as I said, with the UK being such an important part of the giant European music market as well. And I'm very, but let's say excited to to see how those things will turn out in the future. Maybe Ian or Roger and Mark, maybe you have some input. I read that Creative Europe funded in the years from 2014 to 2018, they provided around 90 million euro to UK creative projects. Do you have any input on how this will affect the local cultural scene? And as I said, joint projects where international artists can work together, can play festivals together?
I'll pass that back to Mark in a sec, but also that is a really good point. And there's this thing, I mean, it's basically suicidal what the UK has done. I'm trying to remain apolitical because that's what we're trying to keep the site as. But in terms of its access to funding for the creative arts, no, it's going to create a big problem. We won't have access to Creative Europe funding unless there's some connection to another place in Europe where there is a real base. Obviously, we'll still have Arts Council England funding. And I don't think anybody has made it clear yet whether or not there used to be a visiting arts fund for Arts Council England. And as we're all creative arts, I think there's a massive pushback from everybody, both wherever you might be in Europe or in the EU, because I consider we're still part of Europe, personally. But whether you're in the EU or not, we're all trying to maintain connections and keep us all touring and working so that we've got a richer cultural experience for everybody. And so there is a pushback there, but I'm going to ping over to Mark now. Mark, what do you think about what Tatiana's just said about access to funding?
I have to say I don't have any experience of that. I saw that Lisa Whitetop was in the room. She probably had more experience than I have.
Oh, by the way, I'm going to open this up generally to questions in about 4 or 5 minutes. And so please, if you've got any questions, sort of wave frantically at the screen and we'll try and unmute you. We will be available beyond this, of course, particularly Mark and Rog and myself through the website. We're trying to do this as best we can. Exactly what Tatiana said, clear information is sadly lacking at the moment. What is really clear is that everything is unclear. There's something that Lisa actually said before. Thank you very much, Lisa. Appreciate this. Lisa Whittaker in Scotland. In order to export goods, etc., you're going to need an EORI number. That's a European Operator's Registration and Identification. Amazing. No, I just read it off the screen next to me because I couldn't remember what it was. So that's for sale of goods, etc. You are going to need an EORI number. So in terms of funding, etc., that is going to have a big impact in terms of our ability in the UK to access funding through Creative Europe, but also there's another impact. And that is that oftentimes, if you're wanting to collaborate with European musicians, EU musicians or UK musicians, crossover, you could sometimes attract co-funding from sponsors, but also some other organisations in the UK and in the EU. Of course, the official funding won't be possible anymore. But whether or not we can go for more sponsorship, where people want to show that there's a real connection between UK and EU, I don't know at the moment. With COVID being here, I think it's blown a lot of things out of the water, and people's focus has drifted, of course, because none of us can tour particularly easily, and usually only locally within our own territories. Just check time. Yeah, we've got 15 minutes left, folks. So I am just going to check. Nod. Thank you very much, Nod. Funding from inside the UK for international work will come from any of the 4 funding bodies, Scotland, England, Wales and Northern Ireland. They will all have different schemes and criteria. It's just about politics then, I think, and about whether or not people will want to show, how can I put this? People will want to try and show integration with our partners still beyond that. So it's whether or not the politics will change the way those funds are allocated, I think. Right, so I'll just check if anyone's waving frantically. I've got a lot of pictures, so I can't see you. So if you want to, we've got 15 minutes, 14 minutes left. So before I throw this out to all of you fellow Mexicans out there, and I presume the ones I can't see on video are the ones that have got a really bad hangover. The ones that are just on photographs, it's easy, isn't it? Anyway, so Mark, anything you want to say before I push this out to the mass?
No, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Okay, Rog, do you want to say anything? No, you muted, mate. And Tatiana, do you want to finish off anything from your side?
I think I'm fine.
Okay. Right. So, guys, if there's anybody wants to say anything, because I can't see everyone, if you could just, if someone, wait a second, if you could say bold cap so I can see on the chat, question, you want to say something to the group? Anybody? People typing, I can see fingers moving. Those that, anybody want to come online?
Maybe Ian, in the meantime, could we address that question? I think coming back, Consuelo, if there's a web page where they could find information about all these regulations, especially for people coming from outside the EU?
Sure. Okay. Thank you very much. Well, there is our own website at the moment. There is no one, ironically, this self-voluntary thing that we've all done, there is nothing else. There are lots of bits and pieces, and what seems to have happened over the last few weeks, there have been some initiatives. I've been working with a place called Extracts in Manchester who have been doing various seminars, and I've been working with some circus people recently, the last week or two, who did their own presentation, and there will be some links. And those will be published on the UK Europe Arts website. So if you want to make a note of this, folks, and there's a YouTube channel to subscribe to as well. It's UK, hang on a second, I'll get you the proper one. Yeah, it's UKE artwork.info. That's where we're publishing whatever information we get. And as I said before, it's all completely fact-checked. One thing I must say before I just go for more questions, I forgot to say this, I do apologize. So if you're from the UK and you want to work in Europe, what's the situation? Obviously, Schengen as an area in terms of ATA carnet is one area. However, for work purposes, it isn't if you're a third country national. So this is to the UK people at the moment. At the moment, we don't know what is going to happen. We're sorry to keep saying this. We hope that it will be treated, there'll be some sort of deal with the EU via Mr. Johnson's government. But at the moment, each of those areas, if you fly into Austria or you come on the train, obviously you'll have to do this over land, and you're from the UK, you will have to work with the local authorities, the Austrian authorities, to get what is necessary, work permit, visa, etc. Czech Republic, Estonia, Finland, France, etc. They're all different. So your first point of contact, your landing point, will be the point at where you do your work permit, but that's only for that country. And again, we don't know at the moment for UK artists what the situation is going to be post the 1st of January. The web page on the website, it just says working in the EU. It gives you a very brief description of where we've been able to get information, and also a link through to the source reference material, so on the country website. It's extremely vague in terms of what's going to happen working generally in the EU, but certainly in terms of each specific country as third country national, that is what is officially going to be required. And we really, really don't know what is going to happen at the moment. So I've lost my train of thought now. What was I being asked, Camilla?
So the question was more about like information for those outside the EU.
Yeah, sorry. So the information for those people outside the EU, in effect, this conversation has been mostly targeted within the European continent because that's where the real changes are happening. As far as we know, apart from the UK points-based system, which is being tweaked and politicized, and Mark's just had 500 pages, and I have as well, but I've not read any of it yet because I didn't have time. There don't appear to be any substantive changes for non-EU nationals at the moment. But again, this could change quite easily with the politics of the situation. So if you're coming from anywhere outside Europe, and I should have said this at the beginning, at the moment, we don't think there's any real change. You're going to be treated in exactly the same way as you were before, which is not great in some circumstances. And it depends very much on where you're coming from in the world. If you're coming from Colombia or America or USA, you're coming from Zimbabwe, you're coming from anywhere else, you're still treated as third country nationals. And as Mark said at the beginning, your visa requirements and the certificate of sponsorship will be necessary. The visas are outsourced to a company. It's not TfL, that's Transport for London. What is it? Sorry, it's something like TTL or something. Mark, what is it? Can you remember? You're muted.
It was WorldBridge at one stage.
Yeah, that's right, WorldBridge. So if you're trying to get in from the UK, that's another thing we haven't mentioned. I've got 8 minutes left. We don't know whether or not, depending on what happens with EU nationals wanting to come into the UK, we don't know what the system's going to be other than the COS in terms of how you're going to need to apply for a visa. Maybe you don't need one. We don't know yet. And the problem is the first few months, I think Roger and I had a conversation yesterday, the first few months after this starts, it's going to be, what's that word, chaos. Nobody is really going to know what's happening. But ironically, as echoing what Tatiana said earlier about COVID, none of us are really going to be touring very much in the first few months of 2021. So in a sense, that moves it to one side. Just 1 second, Adrian. European citizens will be treated just the same as non-EU and pre-EU. Yes, that's exactly right, Adrian, at the moment, but exactly the same depends, as Mark said earlier, where you come from in the world. So if you come from the US, you could come in on a certificate of sponsorship without necessarily a visa. But if you come from Colombia, you need a visa. It varies. And at the moment, because of the political impetus we think may be happening, then obviously if a deal is done in the next couple of months, next week, depends on Johnson's frame of mind and Barnier's conversations, I'm trying really hard not to be political, then there may be an impetus to create an opportunity that is going to be simpler. And one last thing I'm going to say, which I didn't know, thank you, Rog. What we can all pray for is that under the carnet system, that musicians are treated the same as they are in Switzerland for personal instruments. I think that would be a massive step to making life mega easy. And we will publish anything like that on the website once we know. So if we don't need a carnet for personal instruments, would be fantastic. I know the Musicians Union in the UK has been pushing for quite some time. And if you check the MU website, musiciansunion.org, I think it is, in the UK, they've been pushing for a combined work permit, visa, carnet, individually for musicians. So it means if you're carrying your guitar, your accordion, your cello, your flute, then you'll have a document which creates a small EU-wide visa for UK musicians and a small carnet for your own personal instruments. And maybe that's possible the other way around, but we simply don't know that at the minute. And Ken's just said, can we have a lobby to make our lives easier? Yeah, just keep telling everybody, just keep writing to your MPs, keep writing to the European Parliament, get stuff out there on the internet. That's what we're trying to do. We've got 5 minutes, folks. So write to DCMS. Thank you, Lisa. Appreciate that. In the UK. I mean, I've been doing this for months and I know a lot of colleagues have. And if you're based in an EU country, write to both your creative industries, your music export agencies, sorry, write to everybody you can think of, both at a national level and at an international level. So if you're in the EU, as it's going to remain for the next century, 2 centuries, whatever, please keep writing to people. We all need to do that. So we've got 5 minutes left. Happy to pick up the concept. Oh yeah, fine.
Maybe Ian, I just saw a question by Catalan Arts in the chat.
Yeah.
And that might be an interesting one if with regards to people working in the music industry, if they go in and out of the UK to attend music conferences or trade fairs, what will change for them?
That now, I'm going to pass that to Mark because I'm not sure, to be honest. Mark, what do you think?
Well, the definition has always been if you're working.
Yeah, I know.
that you actually need, and it's a debatable. It's a very interesting question. I don't think there's a hard answer on that one yet.
Yeah, thanks for that, Tatiana. No, absolutely, because this is part of the problem when you're trying to apply for visas and whether or not a manager coming into the UK with a band who's just sitting there, is he working? Is she working? Is the sound engineer, is she working? Well, obviously she's working. Is the friend of the bass player who's driving the car occasionally, are they working? I know it's been a bit fatuous, but the reality is
Yeah, the reality is we've treated them as being workers in the past.
Oh, everyone's refreshed. So, can people still hear me?
We lost the last sentence, Ian, but go ahead.
Oh, thank you. I can't remember what I said, but thanks everybody. We're still looking to the chat. I mean, we're open for business, so to speak, and to ask questions throughout this period. I honestly think this is going to go on for another 2 years at least. The first part of next year, in a sense, as I've said, COVID has been a bit of a gift in a sense, because none of us have to worry about this so much for the 1st of January. But it's important we keep this moving forward and keeping the information flowing. But please don't share information unless you've really checked it. We're trying to do that from our end. If you see something in the news, please double and triple check it. The number of times I've had to fight Facebook rumors and Twitter rumors, and yeah, it's really important. Anybody want to ask anything else? I'm just looking at the chat. Right, just to say that I think there's going to be another poll at the end of this. Is that right, Camilla? Folks at WOMEX? Is there a second poll?
We could launch the results of the first poll, and we
yeah, that'd be cool.
One.
Let's see where we're all from or what we're doing. Artist 20%, labor. No logistics. Yeah, well, they're all trying to survive at the moment. I mean, seriously. Okay, that's great. Thank you very much. Wait a minute. Thanks, Ina. So that's the last one. Please, that's really important. So we've got an idea of where you are, and if there are any people outside the UK as well. We're going to publish this with WOMEX as part of the links within the description, and this will be available for some time after WOMEX, virtual WOMEX. And very great thanks to Mark, to Tatiana, and to Rog for helping present this, along with the folks at WOMEX, which we really appreciate being able to put this out there. Oh, right, very quick, that poll. Other 11%. Europe 54, great, that's a really cool spread. So we've got Europe, UK and other, quite nicely spread there. We're here to help everybody as best we can. And this will continue, not just for the next 2 years, hopefully for always. So thanks everybody. Hope you've enjoyed it and found it useful.
Thank you so much, Ian. Thank you so much for all these insightful and interesting conversations, especially in the current times. We are running out of time, I'm afraid. Thank you, Mark, Rog, and Tatiana, and everybody for coming and being part of this conversation. Because there are a lot of things to keep on talking. If you wish to engage with the rest of the people and keep the conversation ongoing, we would suggest to create a channel within the WOMEX chat, and you can still share some thoughts and further questions. Also, if you want to maybe contact directly the speakers, I'm happy to share the link with you in the chat. And yeah, 1 minute to go. Yeah, thank you everybody again, and I hope you get to enjoy the rest of the program. if you have some other questions, please, yeah, contact the speakers directly. And yeah, thank you so much for all to come here. Thank you so much. Ciao.
Ciao, everybody. Enjoy the rest of the days.
Ciao for everybody. Enjoy the hangovers. See you soon.
Yes.
Ciao.
Thank you. Enjoy the rest of the program.
Yeah,
There are a lot of things going on.
nearly.
But it's interesting and vibey. That's a good response there.
Yeah, that was cool. I'm glad we were able to do that. And obviously, we'll follow up as well, guys, Yasmin and Camilla, if you want us to.
Shall we stop the streaming?
You're muted, Camilla.
How many times are we going to hear like, you're muted, you're muted? Yeah, no, the live stream, it's out.
You've got 3 people still in this with other than us.
Yeah, they are leaving slowly.
I think everybody, the session is over. We would invite you to leave.
See our smiling faces, positivity. Yay.
Okay.
Hope that went
Is there a possibility to save the chat before we exit the meeting?
Yes,
because
yes,
there was quite some.
Yeah.
Yeah, there are some questions that we didn't go through, but we can share with you the chat.
Yeah, and there was quite some answers as well from different organizations that were quite interesting.
Yes.
There's like the one from Lisa about EORI numbers. I'd totally forgotten about that. That's been coming up a lot on Facebook recently. Do you deal with that, Roger, at all, EORI?
Not from a carnet perspective, but as an exporter of t-shirts, for example, then yes. But
behind you, and I noticed the
shameless plug.
The subconscious advertising behind Roger. Nice one. Need t-shirts, Tatiana, Yasmin, Camille. The only thing I didn't cover was exactly what someone brought up. I can't remember which one of you it was, and that is about localization and people going to be able to. That, for example, they'll have the merchandise made in the UK rather than transporting it across borders and pay the VAT there, which is easier. And in terms of backline hire, somebody actually said, "Is backline instruments?" I couldn't believe. It's like, yeah. So,
for those it might be good, but I think, I mean, you did do a really good job. Also, like really in terms of keeping an eye on the time, and most of the questions were answered. And as Camilla said, we would put a few of the links also that you mentioned in your event description.
Thanks. Yeah.
With all of you, the chat notes, right, Camilla? After that,
brilliant.
So do it again when people might approach you. Really think about if you want to open a channel on the Mattermost.
Okay.
I have a feeling people might come up to that channel and ask a few more questions. We did that with another session yesterday. So yeah.
Okay, I'll do that. I'll probably leave it in a couple of hours because suddenly it'd be like real WOMEX. You're talking to somebody, then 50 people.
Yeah.
You know.